Hello everybody, welcome to another video, and today it is the 18th of November, and we don't have that much to get into today. I just want to make a quick update on the situation on the front lines. I won't be going through every single front today, but I'll be going through the most important ones. So let's start out with Vuhledar, where you can see that I have the city as contested, but in recent days, this dynamic has actually shifted. And so by now, the Russians actually control most of the town, if not all of it. So this happened about a week ago, you'd say, the final Russian advance on this town, and mainly consisted of 155th Marine Brigade and the 36th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade. And so they were able to successfully push back the Ukrainians. And then as the week progressed, they also kicked them out of these like northern outskirts on these agricultural enterprises basically. And so as a result, these Ukrainian units over here, they were forced to retreat either to some of the northern outskirts or to Vuhledar itself. So now I'm going to move it in front of all of you. And as we've seen, the fighting has really shifted closer to Vuhledar. And so you're seeing a lot of artillery strikes now on the Ukrainian positions in Vuhledar. You're seeing much more utilization of Lancet drones. These are smaller scale kamikaze drones. And so they are being used to take out Ukrainian positions over here. And interestingly, there was a video showing these incendiary munitions that were being launched by Russia on Vuhledar. And so this was used a lot in a lot of the more urban sort of battles. For instance, Pesky, you saw a lot of that going on there. Still in Marinka, you see a lot of that going on. So you did have some strikes on the main, basically Ukrainian hubs filled with Ukrainian troops or equipment. You can see how just entering head on into this town would be a suicide mission because the Ukrainians, they have positions in every single one of these houses over here. So you go in with one vehicle, one tank, you're going to get all hell is going to break loose. You're going to get fired upon from all directions, and there's nowhere for you to go because you're on this thin bottleneck road. And so that's why we haven't seen the Russians advance here. They're trying to secure the flanks first, so they secured the flanks from Pavlivka, which is why it's now basically under their control. Although it did take a while, they were able to finally take it over. And now, looking at Mikilske, the situation here is pretty interesting because I was always under the belief that it was under full Russian control, and that includes the areas that are north of the road over here and the north of this body of water or river, or whatever it may be. But it turns out it's wrong because it seems like the Russians, they're now claiming that they captured it recently. And so that means that before this entire renewal of fighting in Pavlivka started, the Ukrainians actually had positions in the northern part of Mikilske. By now, that's probably not the case anymore, but that does imply that the Russians had to have taken over these positions in northern Mikilske. So now the Russian Ministry of Defense, they say that they have severed the connection between the road from Pavlivka to Mikilske. And so that will be a pretty big issue for Ukraine, and it will help Russia's logistical situation. So they sort of can coordinate between the groupings in Pavlivka and Mikilske and then launch some sort of two-pronged attack onto Vuhledar itself. But as I've been stressing, actually going into Vuhledar is going to be very difficult. And so I've always was of the belief that if Vuhledar was to fall, it would have to be through taking over this quarry over here. I think this is a coal mine, actually. My bad. So they would have to take over this coal mine, sort of envelop Vuhledar from all sides. And so that's probably what they're going to do, but it's going to take a very long time given the gradual process that the Russians are operating by in this sector of fighting. But anyway, let's move on to the situation around Donetsk, where we have seen some changes. You can see I updated the map a little. I might also have a few mistakes, so I'm going to also be open about that just so everyone gets a full understanding of the situation. So in recent days, the DPR's best units, and that includes the 100th, I think it is the 100th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, which was around Pesky, but I guess some of their units or some of their basically battalions were moved over to a bit to the west to the Velske. They were filmed taking over some of the Ukrainian fortifications just on the outskirts of the town. I just want to stress how fortified this area is. Literally every single hedgerow has trenches in this area, so it's no wonder that the process of taking it over is very methodical and takes a very, very long time for the sake of preserving manpower, because just going in, assaulting these areas with basically no cover is, again, a suicide mission. And so, in recent days, they were able to take over a pretty important fortification called the swimming pool. That's its nickname. It's actually, at least according to the translation into from Russian to English, this means a water reservoir. I don't really see a reservoir over here, but it doesn't really matter. You can see here the extent of the Ukrainian fortifications, and I don't know when these satellite images are from, but it's probably more extensive now given the fighting. So you can see how Ukraine, they have positions in all this area. They probably also using these shacks to their advantage just to stay fortified under there. I did see in the footage of Russia taking over these trenches that there was a turret station over there, and underground you had a bunch of anti-tank weapons. So yeah, it is a pretty fortified area, but the DPR was able to take it over with the help of the 258th Artillery Battalion and Russian artillery in general. And so now let's look at the bigger picture in terms of Novelske. There's still I still don't expect a head-on assault onto Novelske. I used to think that was possible, but after a deeper inspection, I just don't see how that would be viable, because there are trenches over here that they probably are contested right now. I'm not exactly sure who's in control over here. So obviously, take my map with a grain of salt. The Ukrainians are 100% in control of this hedgerow, and they do have positions over here in a very similar sort of area. Looks a lot like the swimming pool, actually. And they also have positions in this larger so-called water reservoir over here. You can even see the outline of the trenches over here. So there are some fortifications here as well that the DPR would have to overrun. And of course, you have some other trenches right on the outskirts of Novelske over here. And then the town itself is also fortified, every single house, and then these shacks, these agricultural enterprises to the north. These are also fortified. This is where you have Ukraine's forward artillery positions. And so it is necessary for Russia to take over this town, but it is going to be very difficult. It is one of the most fortified. And I don't use that lightly. This is actually one of the most fortified towns on the entire front line. You can see how the front line since the beginning of the war has barely shifted, just like a few kilometers at most. But let's move on to Pervomaiske, where there is some intense urban battles going on. And again, my map might be wrong. This is the basically the Rybar's assessment. This line over here, but I did see other maps showing the fighting actually closer to here, and so this entire area is probably just a gray zone based off of that, where you have tanks going in and out. You don't actually have military formation stationed in here for a long period of time, obviously. And so, in terms of specifics about this area, you did have a Russian breakthrough into the southern parts of Prvomaiske due to the fall of Pesky. And so, as a result of this breakthrough, which was really aided by the capture of the anthill fortifications around the Donetsk airport, the Ukrainians have actually sent some of their units that were stationed in Kherson to the front line from about Avdiivka to Prvomaiske. And so, in terms of specific units, you have the 137th Naval Infantry Battalion, and that was that unit. It actually served in Andriivka and Lozovet, which was the bridgehead, a very famous bridgehead in Kherson area. And so now they are very battle hardened, and they've been sent to the Prvomaisk area. Also, the 36th Marine Brigade has been sent, and specifically the 503rd Naval Infantry Battalion will also be stationed in Prvomaisk. And so they have some very good experience, and they are part of the reason why the Ukrainians have been able to keep the Russians at bay. And so, in terms of units that are fighting in this area, you have the Sparta Battalion from the DPR side and also the 1st Slavyansk Battalion. And they are mainly organized right now in Pervomaiska into these tank companies where I think they consist of about 10 tanks each. And so you have this back and forth fighting over there. There was some pretty cool footage of Russian tank crews trying to advance in this area. And based on the fact that we haven't seen any sizable advances, we can say that these advances have not really manifested any success as of yet. But we have seen no, we haven't seen Russia stop their attempts to advance in the sector, which does imply that they are serious about this and that they do have probably a lot more of capabilities to continue these offensive operations for a while. And we have seen at least a limited success for the DPR and Russian units in Vodiane and Opitny. They took Opitny. Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed this, and also all the geolocations did. So now they've actually advanced a bit north into these other hedgerows. They're a bit less fortified than the ones around Nivelske. And so the threat over here to the Ukrainians is that they can get flanked in Avdiivka. It's going to be very difficult to flank Avdiivka, but it could potentially be done after a long and grueling process conducted by the Russians. And so the Ukraine has to be prepared for that. They really need to strengthen their flanks, specifically around some of these key towns to the north of the Russian positions in Opitny and also in the industrial sector of the town. In Vodiane, you have some very heavy fighting right now, mainly in the eastern part of the town, while Ukraine still has a solid control of the western part of the town, but the eastern part of the town is totally decimated. You do have tank crews going in and just like street to street fighting. I do expect Vodiane to fall very soon, but again, it took Russia a very long time to even reach this position, which is only a few kilometers north of Donetsk. And after this point, there's going to be probably a better chance that Russia can flank Pervomaiske and take that over quickly. And of course, the Russians, they will be able to take over this road over here, which is necessary to supplies going to the Avdiivka garrison. So while all of this is happening, you do have some pretty heavy artillery duels going on a bit to the east around the Batovka mine, where you have some other DPR units. I think the Kalmuis battalion is stationed in this area, but I don't have them on the map. I'll add them later. The Kalmuis battalion of the DPR, one of their best units, is stationed in this area around Spartak. They are having artillery duels with the Ukrainian defenders, including the 36th Separate Marine Brigade, which I have moved to this area. Now let's move on to Bakhmut, which is the last front that is worth talking about. We do have some minor changes over here. So the Wagner group, they've actually been able to advance a little. They have finally taken over the Bakhmut garbage dump. You can see that based on the geolocation that there was fighting in this compound. I think this is like a waste sorting plant, and the Wagner group, they were able to take it after hours of battles and after repelling some Ukrainian counterattacks. And so now they have actually a pretty firm control of the Fedora Maximenka road, at least the southern part of it. And from there, they can actually advance and take the rest of the road. So now they actually have a staging ground to actually reach the urban areas in Bakhmut. And they finally have reached the district of Zabakhmutka, which is the one of the easternmost districts in Bakhmut. But again, it is a residential area, so we'll see if the pace of the Russian battles in this area actually slow down even more than they have been before, just because of the urban setting. It might speed up a little, though, if they're able to take over these residential areas, because they might not be as fortified as trenches. But we will have to see about that. Meanwhile, on the rest of the front, there hasn't been much changes in Opitny, Ivanhrad. Both sides control them respectively. And then, of course, Klishchivka, I have no news from there. But I would be expecting the Wagner group to just continue to wage offensive operations in this area, trying to take over all of the frontline towns. Most importantly, at the moment, is Andrivka. So we'll see what happens over there. And that's really it for today. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys.